Toscha Seidel, the Hollywood violinist.
Of darkest Russia.
During Hollywood's golden age, from the 1930s through to the 1950s, major studios like MGM and Warner Brothers had their own in-house orchestras. These studios had dedicated musicians and composers who worked exclusively for them, creating the iconic film scores of the era. From an early age, Toscha Seidel was praised for his rich and romantic tone and for his free and expressive playing. Who was this great violinist? And how did he end up in Hollywood during its golden age? Born in Odessa on November the 17th, 1899 to a Jewish family in the same town as cellist Piatigorsky and a number of other talented violinists, Toscha Seidel became a student of Leopold Auer in St. Petersburg. Seidel became known for a lush romantic tone and a unique and free rubato. His fellow students included violinists Jascha Heifetz, Ephraim Zimbalist, Misha Aumann, and Nathan Milstein. Seidel made his official concert debut on September 1st, 1915 in Christiania, now known as Oslo in Norway. This was followed by a European tour and a much revered North American debut at Carnegie Hall on April 14th, 1918. Heifetz and Seidel, whilst in the Auer class, played the Bach Double Concerto together in 1912 and 1913, when the boys were just 12 and 13 years old. In 1916 they played it again in Norway for the royal family. It is rumoured that Auer said of the two, "Jascha plays like an angel, but Toscha plays like the devil." Heifetz and Seidel in the Auer class were firm friends, although there are reports of competition amongst them. Ruth Ray, a former violinist and close friend of them both, had many stories of the rivalry that appeared between them. One such story was of the races that they would run when they were children. Ruth was 13 years old, Heifetz 10 years old, and Seidel 11 years old. Instead of all of them running a race together, Ruth would run against Seidel and win. She would then race Heifetz and let him win so that he wouldn't feel bad. In 1924, Seidel acquired the Da Vinci Stradivarius from Emil Herrmann in New York, and the news was reported on the front page of the New York Times. This was no doubt an eventful period for Seidel. Just days after his purchase of the Da Vinci was announced, he became an American citizen. Through the 1920s, he continued to tour across the United States, Europe and Australia, but in the early 30s he halted his concert career to become a radio and studio performer. He hosted the popular weekly radio show The Toscha Seidel Program and worked as CBS's musical director. In the 1930s, he settled in the United States, before making his way to Hollywood, where he made a career in the studios of motion pictures. He had a show on CBS radio called the Toscha Seidel Program. He was featured as soloist in several Hollywood productions, including the movies Intermezzo, Melody for Three, and even The Wizard of Oz. He was also an avid chess player like Misha Aumann.
Toscha Seidel, my dear fellow. It's a long time since we played together.
Not since our sparring days.
That's right. All right, gentlemen. We'll start with the letter B, second movement. All right. Letter B.
He was the uncredited soloist in The Wizard of Oz. In 1922, George Gershwin wrote a song about him and his fellow Russian Jewish virtuoso violinists called Misha, Yasha, Toscha, Sasha.
When we were 3 years old or so, we all began to play the fiddle in darkest Russia. When we began, our notes were sour, until a man, Professor Hour, set out to show us one and all how we could pack them in old Albert Hall. Old Albert Hall, old Albert Hall.
In 1929, Seidel married Estelle Mannheim and moved to a house in Pelham, New York. They had a large dog named Hector, who was a perfect warlord of a Great Dane. 170 pounds of him, stretching his powerful length across Seidel's doorstep. Interestingly, Heifetz also owned Great Danes at round about this time when he had his farm. Estelle Mannheim had graduated from the University of California, where she received her Bachelor of Arts degree, and taught in California before the couple married. It was at this house in 1934 that Seidel first met Albert Einstein in exchange for a hand-drawn sketch depicting the phenomenon of length contraction. Seidel gave Einstein violin lessons. The two went on to perform a Bach double concerto at a fundraiser to benefit German Jewish scientists imperiled by the Nazis. Later, Seidel moved to California, like Heifetz himself, to play for the silver screen as a soloist and concertmaster for Paramount Studios, being the uncredited violin soloist on the 1939 Hollywood classic musical The Wizard of Oz. And in that same year recording the famous theme from the critically acclaimed film Intermezzo, starring Ingrid Bergman and Leslie Howard. His movie work was balanced by commercial gigs and other studio recordings. In 1941 he recorded Erich Wolfgang Korngold's Much Ado About Nothing, accompanied by the composer at the piano. Seidel and Estelle lived in a stately Tudor house in the Beverly Hills Flats. He was friendly with Charlie Chaplin, and the two would play duets at Chaplin's house. After World War II, Seidel taught at the Los Angeles Conservatory of Music. He also became a radio celebrity. He became known to millions of radio listeners through his performances on the weekly Toscha Seidel program, broadcast by the Columbia Broadcasting System. During summer months, he performed on Sunday afternoons at 3 p.m. on the CBS Symphonic Hour as a soloist. Seidel rose to the rank of musical director of the Columbia Broadcasting System and as chairman of the CBS Musical Advisory Board. To quote from the Tarisio article, Seidel's playing was quintessential Hollywood from its golden age, emotional and expressive, at times tempestuous, at times melodramatic. The American scholar, violinist and writer Adam Beyer wrote that we largely associate love scenes or depictions of the less fortunate in films, or any scene evoking tears or strong emotions with the sound of the violin, is largely due to Seidel. Toscha Seidel became good friends with George Nykrug when he was concertmaster of the Paramount Studio Orchestra. George was principal cellist, and they often played chamber music together. George said that Toscha had the biggest and most beautiful tone he had ever heard. He also said that he had the utmost respect for Toscha's extraordinary abilities. Seidel died on November the 15th, 1962. Toscha Seidel performed on several well-known violins, including the Antonio Stradivari Da Vinci violin of 1714, now known as the X-Seidel, which he purchased in 1924 for $25,000 and said he wouldn't trade for $1 million. A Giovanni Battista Guadagnini from 1786, now known as the X-Seidel, as well as a copy of the Allard Stradivari by Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume dating from 1860. With Seidel's violin solos in The Wizard of Oz, could his Strad possibly be one of the most widely heard Strads ever? The great pedagogue and violinist Carl Flesch said of Seidel, "The quality of his tone is one of the most beautiful I've heard in my career. It is an injustice of fate that he is not considered the third in a triumvirate with Heifetz and Aumann." A few exquisite recordings exist of Seidel in the late 1920s and early 30s. In 1931 he recorded the Brahms and Grieg violin sonatas. The boy Jascha Heifetz was one of those in a group of young Jewish violinists who later startled the world. The others would include Mischa Aumann, Toscha Seidel, Ephraim Zimbalist and Nathan Milstein. These are the words of Harold Schonberg, published in the New York Times in December 1987. Seidel is indeed remembered as one of the finest violin virtuosi of the 20th century, noted for his lush, romantic tone and free rubato.